Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is an interview with someone I admire and respect very much as an architect and as a person. If I had to use one word to describe him, it would be generous. He is generous in his work, in his practice, and is just an incredibly generous and wonderful person. Scott Kemp is a sole practitioner who's been working with Indigenous communities for the past 15 years. And before that, he's worked with architects like Shin Takamatsu and Bing Tom. And before he started his own practice, he was a partner at Omicron, but he decided to follow his passion when he started working with First Nations communities. I thought it would be interesting to hear from him because right now I feel like a lot of us are learning and relearning how to engage with our communities, especially the ones who's been marginalized throughout history. And as you know, the Indigenous people of Canada have been chronically mistreated throughout history. And so we will take a look at how he helps to create positive change in these communities through some of his projects. Scott also sits on a lot of local and national committees, including the CALA, the Canadian Architectural Licensing Authorities, and the AIBC, the Architectural Institution of Canada, and the AFBC, the Architectural Foundation of Canada. And he was also the past president of the AIBC. Right now, it seems that there is a push for change in the profession. And so I wanted to hear his thoughts on our roles as architects, as well as his thoughts on the future of the profession. That being said, this was my first interview on Zoom, so there were a few technical hiccups, and I did let the interview run a little bit long, so I have divided the interview into two parts, although the themes blend into each other. In the first interview, we will talk about his work and his approach to working with Indigenous communities. And in the second video, we will take a step back and look at the profession in general. I understand you don't have a website, am I right?
I know I'm terrible. I'm really bad. And I have all the material and I have somebody that could do it. I just never bothered to get it done.
So how do you get commissions? It's just referrals?
Yeah. And I don't answer RFPs. I don't do any RFPs.
Oh, really?
I'm not really set up for that. Like, again, I'm a sole practitioner. So the kind of marketing effort required to answer RFPs, I don't do. And so far, I got more work than I know what to do with. So it hasn't been a problem. And it's not necessarily how one should do it from a business point of view. But so far it's been successful for me. So like I just keep getting work. I got another job yesterday. So it just keeps coming.
I mean, I guess that means your clients are fairly happy with your work.
Well, one of the things that's very nice, like the Indigenous communities, well, there's many, but they do have a fair amount of contact between them.
Yeah, they're a pretty close-knit community.
Yeah, so that's really good. And they're very loyal. They're fantastic clients. Like I really do the work that I do.
And how did you get your first commission?
The very first commission was actually for Hupetcheset First Nation. It was a carving shed. Right, yeah. That's the design build one, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So the Hupetcheset, they didn't do totem poles. Like most totem poles tell stories.
Yeah.
All the figures are storytelling elements in the pole. What the Hupetcheset do is welcoming figures, and they are actual figures. They carve two, a male and a female. It's right in the middle of town. Wanted to, they haven't done one in 100 years. So they wanted to carve two welcoming figures. So the man welcoming people from the land, female welcoming people from the water. and they wanted to carve the poles on the site. So we built a little carving shed so that the workers had cover when they were carving.
Yeah, that was a beautiful little structure.
It was fun. I went and built it. Yeah. So I built it with 3 community members.
So did they already have construction skills?
Nope.
So you taught them how to build?
Yeah, the 3 guys were very handy, but I was kind of the site superintendent, site foreman. Seemed to do that a bit. There's also, in the portfolio was the Buddhist temple. So a friend of mine is in that community, or involved in the Buddhist community, and it's in Coombs on Vancouver Island. So he approached me and we worked on other projects together. He approached me and wanted me to do this design, to house this Guru Rinpoche, who's the statue, is a reincarnation of Guru Rinpoche. And he told me the story. So they had 20. So this is the Tibetan community. There's 25 of Guru Rinpoches all around the world. And when you see Guru Rinpoche, he gives you guidance and good feeling, sends off good vibes. Usually place them all around the world. So the world is wrapped up in goodness from Guru Rinpoche, which is kind of a nice story.
That's
Anyways,
beautiful.
this community got chosen for one of them, which is quite significant.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So he asked me to do the design. I did the design, and then afterwards he said, and we don't have any general contractors when we build it ourselves. So you have to come and show us how to build it. Each weekend, most weekends, for about 1.5 years with the community.
Cool. Okay. What are the benefits of being your own contractor?
I enjoy it. I've always that. Again, to me, I love the whole process of architecture, right? From initial concept right through to finished building. It's all steps that I enjoy. So building is one of them. And I've always enjoyed kind of hands-on construction.
But you're a sole proprietor, right? So that must be quite a bit of work for one person.
Well, it gives you the freedom to do that if you want. That's kind of why I've set the firm up the way it is. Like, it is just me and people that work on contract with me or collaborate together. Gives me the freedom to do what I want. Like, if I have 20 people, to be honest, you're not doing architecture. You become the marketer and the manager.
Yeah, that's right.
Not doing architecture. I love doing architecture. So that's why I've kept the firm very small. So if I want to go away for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and work on site, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not able to staff or other partners. I can go do that if I want.
So are you also learning quite a bit about their local traditional construction techniques?
Yes, both back and forth. But also, even more importantly, is the design, is the actual design of the building.
Can you give us an example?
The way when we go into these communities, the Indigenous communities, I don't design it, really. They design it. So I go in with a roll of sketch paper and pens, and I just listen, and they talk. And through that process, we come up with the design. I'll show you. Okay, so there's a typical design shred. So I don't really say anything. I just listen and I draw. And then at the end of it, we get that. It can take 2, 3, 4 hours. We start at one end of the sketch paper and go to the other end. Through that consultation, through that listening. Because it's their building, it's not my building. I think that's where, the more I become, the more I do architecture, like, you train to kind of, it's your building.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm less supportive of that position now.
Right.
I think it's the community's building.
Right. Yeah. So is this process pretty similar throughout a lot of your projects?
Yeah, we do all the time. Yep.
So sketching skill is pretty important.
Well, it's fun. I enjoy it. Here's another example. So this is Sachem, which is on Vancouver Island near Swartz Bay. They wanted daycare. And when we met with them, I've got a couple of sketches, but it's not the whole role. It's just a couple of them. But they talked about wanting like a longhouse. They wanted to talk about a traditional form, but almost like a village. So there's a series of longhouses all connected together. So as they were talking, through, so that was the form, that was the kind of concept, and that became the building. So then another one was, so this is Saiku. So this is up near Vanderhoof, near Prince George. Also daycare. And the team that we're meeting with was quite specific about the program of the building. Like they wanted one arm or one side of, they said at one side of the corridor initially, where you have the daycare, which is infant toddlers and the 3 to 5 and the nap room and the storage and toilets.
Yeah.
The other side, they wanted a cultural room and after school care. But then she started talking about the playground needs to be somewhat central and part of, so everybody has access, but also needs to be protected. And then she we wrap our hands around the children, and she did this, where the design came in. So from that, we sketched that. So there's the building, there's the hands wrapping around the playground.
Oh, I love that.
That's the entrance. So all of this is done, this is all done live. I don't touch these drawings afterwards. I'm drawing these while we're meeting.
Right.
And then, there's the building.
So you really are just listening and sketching and they're designing.
They're part of it. Again, especially with Indigenous communities, they're visual. They have huge skills graphically and visually, you know. But also historically, everything has been done for them. They're kind of wards of the state, sadly. Right? Canada set it up. And normally, when a building is built in an Indigenous community, it's funded by the federal government. The federal government hires all the consultants. Consultants do the work. They have some consultation. I don't know what extent.
Yeah.
They then tender it. A contractor comes in and builds it. And at the end of that, they're given the keys to the building. So they're not really involved. So what we try to do is the exact opposite. So like we go in with a blank piece of paper and we work with them to design the building. But also one of the major focuses of all our projects is to try to maximize the returns or the potentials of the project. So we really focus on building capacity within the community. So that means training, employment, everything, using materials, using local craftsmen. Like for instance, what have I got here? I've done quite a few, I've done 3 projects with Malahat First Nations. They're on the island. They're very progressive. They're a great community. They've, over the last 4 or 5 years, worked really hard in doing this and creating opportunities within their community, on from 90% unemployment to 90% employment.
Wow.
These projects.
Wow.
One of the projects we did was we renovated their big house. So this is the traditional big house.
Yeah.
And they had a kind of a little building attached to it, which was a toilet and kitchen, dining hall, but it was in really bad shape. So we demolished it and then we built this new addition to it. So all the wood, everything is their trees. They bought a sawmill and all of this was milled was cut off their land, fabricated on site by them.
So is wood the default material then, just because it's something that the community can work with?
Yeah, the use of wood was the historic material.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's a fantastic material.
Yeah.
It only makes sense to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also part of the capacity building. So a lot of these communities are very remote. Like Honeycatine, you drive to Williams Lake, and then it's about a 3-hour drive, 2 hours on a gravel road, like a really rough gravel road.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, you drive all the way into Williams Lake, and then you drive west back again to the coastal mountains. So when you get to Honeycatine, you're basically back at the coast. If you go up and over the mountains, coast. So it's very, very remote. So to bring stuff into the community is hugely expensive. You can use trees, logs, everything that's there. Like we've done a lot of work up and down the coast. Again, a lot of communities have no road access. It's only water access.
Right. Mm-hmm.
To bring material in is hugely expensive. To bring workers in, because you have to provide them accommodation and food, massively expensive. If you hire a local community member, not only do you give them a job, you give them training, you'll save a lot of money.
So it's not just the building that's benefiting the community, it's actually the building of the building.
Yeah, because we went in, Bob and I went into, and Kelly, I'll talk about Kelly. We went into a house which is north of Tofino. And again, it's only water access. They were building a sixplex. We went in with Right to Read to do an adult learning center, come up with a concept. At that time, they were also building a sixplex residential building. And it was a typical federal government project, right? So they came in, they got the funds, they came in, the design was already done. They hired a contractor and they're building it. When we were there, they were painting. So a painting company, they had 5 staff. They barged 2 vehicles in. So they were staying, the community has a little communal building where you have accommodation and then one of the community members is the cook, right? So it's very nice. But that crew was at huge expense painting the building. No community members worked on that building whatsoever.
Oh, interesting.
And when we were meeting with them, they said, this is what we don't want. This is crazy. There's no employment for community members. There's no input into the design community. There's no training and long-term benefit. So that's why we focus all our projects towards capacity building. And I mentioned Kelly. I don't know if so I've worked with Kelly for a few years now. She was an intern. So she's Tahltan First Nations. She's from Telegraph Creek. I met her through the AIBC. She grew up north, but graduated from UBC, was an intern, and then really struggled trying to find employment to finish her intern hours. So I was her mentor, but she wasn't logging any hours. So then we switched it so that I became her employer. And a colleague of mine, Gord, became her mentor. So then worked on projects with me, Right to Read projects. And now she's fully registered.
Oh, wow.
But she's the 4th Indigenous architect in BC that I know.
Oh my God.
And I think
That's crazy.
Or 18th in Canada.
Wow.
It's a very small community.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we also do, like building capacity from a design point of view. Help Kelly get registered.
Do you find that the way that she interacts with the community is quite different from the way that you do?
It's great. to be honest, I like it when Kelly is there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go into the community, you're still another white guy, right? You can't get around that. And they've had lots of foreigners into the community.
Yeah.
It'd be nice having Kelly come in.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that we are, you know, wanting to truly collaborate and build capacity within the community in every regard.
Yeah.
One of the other projects I'm working on is the Silkatine National Government. They're quite unique with First Nations in Canada. There's 6 communities that make up the Silkatine. They're the ones that actually took the federal government to court and won a ruling in the Supreme Court. And were actually granted titled land, because First Nations, the federal government has given them reserves.
Right.
Sometimes the reserves really are not reflective of where their traditional lands were. And the reserves are a very small portion of what they used to use as, you know, part of their culture. So that ruling by the Supreme Court actually recognized, and it was Hunnikatine, they recognized their traditional territory and granted them title. So it's hugely significant legally within the world of Indigenous communities in Canada. Anyway, so the Silkatine, the 6 communities have come together to create a nation, the Silkatine Nation. They have a government, Silkatine National Government. They were quite heavily impacted in the fires of 2017.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
So this is, the Silkatine is near Williams Lake. So that summer was terrible in that whole area. They were heavily impacted and had a lot of unpleasant experiences through the fires. You know, the provincial government is responsible for fighting fires. So the things that happened were like the communities would volunteer knowledge and advice on how to fight the fires. The provincial firefighters basically ignored them.
Jeez.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, they decided an evacuation was necessary, the provincial government. So they ordered the communities to evacuate. The community said, you don't have authority over us. You cannot order us to evacuate. It's up to them to decide. So there was a lot of conflict there. And it got to the degree where at one point, the RCMP said to one community, if you don't evacuate, we're going to take the children away from you and evacuate them. So given the history of schools in Canada, that was received rather badly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The sad thing is, like, each of the community members, like, they know the land, they know their community, they know, you know, with the cultural knowledge, they know how to fight fires, and it was not utilized, that knowledge. For instance, in a lot of communities, they said, you know, here's the fire, it's starting, if we do this, this, and this, you know, we have a chance of containing it. And 5, 6, 7 days later, they got around to doing it. By that time, it was too late. So the damage that occurred was far greater than if they had been listened to. The long short of it is, they've actually signed a memorandum of understanding. So the Silkatine, the provincial government, and the federal government, such that in the event of an emergency, like fires, the Silkatine now have the authority to look after their communities. This feasibility study comes from that request, or that recognition. So what they want to do is build evacuation centers for each of the communities, and then a training center. So a lot of the community members know kind of naturally how to fight forest fires, but they're not formally trained. It would be good for them to be actually certified as qualified forest fire, and also get the equipment and the other training that's needed to do this, because they could also do not only forest fires, they could do like high rescue, they could do rapid water rescue. So anyways, they are recognized as being the authority to do this. 6 nations. So I met with each of the 6 nations. And the reason I'm doing this is shows you, here's the sketches. So this is with Anaheims. They talked about, this is evacuation center like the big house. They wanted, again, it's, kind of a series of villages. So these were just sketches that I did as they were talking, and this is the training center. So they wanted a large room. They needed equipment for like equipment bays for trucks. So like we just kind of went through, they talked about, outdoor access to water. They wanted places for RVs camping. From those sketches, I then did, just concept plans. So that's the site plan. So this building is the evacuation center. So that's where the community would be evacuated to. This training center. So there's the evacuation center. This is the training center. So it's got a large gym. It's got the equipment bays. It's got classrooms. It's got cultural rooms. It's got accommodation for 20 people upstairs.
Yeah.
This is the evacuation center. So it's a big house, traditional big house with kitchens, and then a large hall where people can sleep, gather.
Yeah.
Emergencies. So we did that through each of the communities. So this is Estee Law. They talked more about the outdoors. They wanted places for other equipment storage, but they wanted places, the arbors or cultural gathering places. They need helicopters. So like as they're talking, I'm just drawing. So there's another evacuation center. And they talked about their kind of logo was a bird.
Yeah.
Said, well, can you make the building in the shape of our logo, the bird? So then that's where that plan came.
Oh, cool.
And then this one was, this guy, he was great, the chief. This is Chief Russ. He says, I don't like rectangular buildings. I like curved buildings. Because they did like the pit houses. So he said, can we do a curved house, like a pit house? And I said, right. So then we started doing these sort of buildings. So it's kind of a half-buried building with quiet rooms and then big open spaces. You see, and then there's the building. So you've got the big hall, got other activities, and then all the kind of back of house stuff is buried into the hill.
Are these all within one session?
No, we had a couple of times we did 2 in one day, but I did a couple of trips going up. These 2 to 3 to 4 hours to do.
Yeah.
Just listening and drawing.
Yeah.
So it takes a bit of time. Like Tusi talked about, they talked about, they needed an ambulance center. They talked about like sweat lodges. They talked about, again, by the water, they wanted tent and RV sites. They needed they actually said we need a tower to dry the hoses. So that became, this became the training center or the evacuation center. So you could, again, open spaces and then towers. And they actually wanted accommodation. So there's some, so not this one, they wanted a little health center. So this is the health center. There's the hall, there's the equipment base.
Yeah.
This community, Citadel is actually quite remote. So they talked about having hide, so racks to dry the hides, sweat lodges, again, little health centers. They talked about along the water, they would have arbors, they would have playgrounds, they would have RV sites. But this is the one. So this is kind of a small version one. And then Honeycatine. Sorry, go back a bit. Which one did they have? This one. Sorry. This one has actually accommodation. Because Estee Lauder is, again, very remote. They're on one side of the Fraser River, and they used to have a ferry, and the ferry got canceled.
Just like that.
Shut.
Okay, it's gone.
So
okay.
It really has isolated the community. When you bring people into the community, you need to provide housing. So these have kind of self-contained suites. The building. And then the last one was Honeycatine, and became a combination of the longhouse versus the pit house. So again, they need a place to gather. They need a place where the community can look after the community in an evacuation situation. So he talked about the big house. He talked about the pit house. So it became kind of a long pit house. So it's buried on the both sides with a central space, which is the communal space, and then all the private functions are down the side. An open end buried on either side, and then that became the building.
I love that these traditional typologies translate so well into modern building.
Yeah, it's fun.
So is there still quite a bit of distrust within the community against people who maybe are funding the project, or even against you?
Yes. Yep, there is. If you know the history of how the Indigenous communities have been treated, to be honest, I'm surprised there's not more mistrust.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised. But do you find that you have to pull things out of them a little bit more? Are there things that are left unsaid at the table?
No, I find like if you, again, the way we work where we just listen and draw.
Yeah.
Like they've never been involved in it that way. They've never had the opportunity to give input. So they're hugely receptive. So there's no part of my problem is keeping up.
Yeah.
To draw fast enough.
Yeah.
When the ideas are coming, right?
Yeah.
To not forget something.
Yeah. Right.
And there's usually an aha moment, one of those kind of really insightful moments, meetings where it really starts to click. Like when Colleen is Saikus, when she said, we wrap our hands around the children to care for them. It was kind of an aha moment.
Right.
Designed from that. So almost always there's one of those moments in these meetings that becomes the inspiration. And
even from a practical point of view, it seems like a very efficient way to do the design process. Like in my experience, we've usually gone to the client meeting, they tell us what they need, all the requirements, and then we go back to the office and then we do the sketches, we start doing the concept design, and then it's like a back and forth. But yeah, I've never really designed right in front of the client. It seems kind of scary.
It's just become a visual record of the conversation. I bring them back. Every time I bring all the sketches back.
Yeah.
And they go, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Historically, we as a profession, when we engage a community, actually that means, we make the little colored squares on the program elements. We put them on the site, we shuffle them around.
Yeah.
We get the community members to shuffle them around.
Yeah.
That's okay, but it's a very small part of the design. And its program relationship doesn't give you the spirit of the building. Like
Yeah.
with the sketches, I try very hard to draw everything. So it's plan, section, elevations, perspective. So you're really trying to not only work the building out functionally, program, here's all it works, it's sitting on the site, but also what does it feel like? What's it look like? The spirit of the building. And that's important, in my opinion. It's their building. It represents their community. It is part of rebuilding their community. Kelly talks about this quite passionately. She strongly believes that architecture and art is the way forward in actually healing the communities and moving the communities forward, using their culture as an expression of the community and a celebration of the community. And art and architecture is part of that. So these become part of the process of, well, she doesn't say reconciliation because there was never any conciliation to begin with. So, but moving forward.